She had lied, and now, there was no going back. Weeks ago, Kate had told a story. A story of luxury, of wealth beyond imagination. She had painted a picture of herself as a multi-millionaire, a woman who lived in a grand house with servants and the finest clothes. She had convinced everyone, her friends, her colleagues, even her family. They had believed her, and for a while, Kate had felt on top of the world. But the truth was, she was far from wealthy. Her life had been far more humble, filled with small struggles that no one knew about. She had borrowed clothes for important meetings and used borrowed money to rent a car just to appear wealthy. The lies felt comforting in the beginning. But now, as she sat on that bench, she realized how heavy they had become. And so, here she was, in a small part of the city, at a roadside food stall. Her stomach growled with hunger, but it wasn't just for food. It was for something deeper, something far more painful. It was hunger for truth, for redemption, for the love she had lost in the process of all those lies. The woman at the food stall smiled warmly at Kate, offering her a plate of fried rice and chicken wings, the steam rising from the dish like an invitation to forget her troubles. Kate smiled back, though her heart was heavy. She had been here many times before, when things were much harder, when she couldn't afford the luxury she had pretended to own. In truth, this food was all she could afford now. The old man who ran the stall nodded at her kindly. He was one of the few people who knew the real Kate, the one who had struggled just like everyone else. "You look tired, Kate," he said in a voice that held years of wisdom. "Life's been hard on you, hasn't it?" Kate nodded, her throat tight with emotion. The tears she had been fighting back for days began to sting her eyes. She had spent so many years running from the truth, from the reality of her life. She had built walls of lies around herself, and now, she felt trapped inside them. She couldn't bear to look anyone in the eye anymore, not after everything she had said, everything she had made people believe. She took the plate, her hands shaking as she set it down on the small wooden table in front of her. The old man continued to watch her quietly, as if waiting for her to speak. For a moment, she felt like a child, lost in a world she had no control over. She had been so desperate to be someone else, someone better, that she had forgotten who she really was. "Do you ever regret it?" the old man asked softly, his voice breaking through her tangled thoughts. Kate glanced at him, surprised by the question. She had never told him about the lies, but somehow, he knew. He always knew. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I could change things. I thought if I could be someone important, then maybe I wouldn't feel so lost. Maybe I wouldn't feel so small." The old man nodded, his face full of understanding. He had lived long enough to know how painful the search for meaning could be. "We all want to be seen, Kate. We all want to be loved, but sometimes, we forget that the love we seek doesn't come from pretending to be someone we're not. It comes from embracing who we truly are." Kate bit her lip, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. He was right. She had spent so much time pretending, trying to be something she was not. But in the process, she had lost the one thing she needed the most, the ability to love herself. She had made so many sacrifices for the sake of an image. She had pushed people away, afraid that they would see the truth. She had pushed away her family, her friends, even her own heart. She had been too afraid to admit that she wasn't the woman she had claimed to be, that she was just a person, struggling like everyone else. But now, sitting here in the quiet of the roadside food stall, with the weight of her lies heavy on her shoulders, Kate realized something. She didn't need to be anyone else. She didn't need the $1 million house, the designer clothes, or the fake image of perfection. What she needed was to face the truth. What she needed was to find a way to love herself, to embrace her flaws and her scars, and to start over. As she picked up her fork and took a bite of the fried rice, Kate felt a small spark of hope stir within her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to start the healing process, enough to begin the journey back to herself. The wind blew again, colder this time, and Kate wrapped her arms around herself, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought about the lies she had told, the people she had hurt, and the pain she had caused. But she also thought about the people who had loved her, the ones who had stood by her, even when she had pushed them away. She thought of her mother, who had always believed in her, and of her childhood friend, Maria, who had never judged her for her mistakes. In her mind, Kate could almost hear her mother's voice, You are enough, just as you are. You don't need to pretend. You are worthy of love, Kate. Kate felt a pang of guilt as the memory of her mother's words washed over her. She had pushed her away so many times, ashamed of her life, of who she had become. But the truth was, her mother had always loved her, and that love was real, even if Kate hadn't fully understood it. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, and Kate allowed herself to cry. She cried for the mistakes she had made, for the years she had wasted running from herself. But more than anything, she cried for the love she had been too afraid to accept, the love that had always been there, waiting for her to embrace it. When she finally stopped crying, she looked up and saw the old man watching her, his eyes kind and understanding. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. His presence was enough, a quiet reminder that she didn't have to face this alone. As Kate finished her meal, she knew that she couldn't undo the lies she had told. But she could start over. She could begin the difficult process of being honest with herself, of facing the truth and accepting it. It would take time, and it would be painful, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. The world around her was still busy, still moving at its frantic pace. People passed by, unaware of the woman sitting at the roadside food stall, her heart heavy with the weight of her past. But in that moment, Kate knew something important. She didn't need to impress anyone anymore. She didn't need to be the person she had pretended to be. She just needed to be herself. And as she finished the last bite of food, she felt something shift within her. It wasn't a grand revelation, but it was enough. It was the beginning of healing, the beginning of learning to love herself again. As she stood up to leave, the old man nodded at her one last time, his eyes filled with quiet encouragement. Kate smiled softly, a smile that was a little more genuine than the ones she had worn in the past. She didn't have it all figured out yet, but she was willing to try. And that, she realized, was enough. The road ahead was uncertain, and she knew there would be moments of doubt and regret. But for now, Kate was no longer pretending. She was simply living, breathing, and learning to accept the love that had always been there for her. And that, she thought, was the most important thing of all.